What's up, everyone? Online Prep Coach Alex here with theprepcoach.com, and this is the science behind ProfessorNutz from Advantage, from ProjectAD, Joe Binley, everyone over there. This is going to be at a couple places, so if you're watching me on your screen, then this is a YouTube video, Vimeo video, somewhere with ProjectAD or ProfessorNutz, maybe on their website. And if you're listening to this, this is going to be on Beast Fitness Radio, which can be found at Libsyn, iTunes, all that kind of good stuff. Type into Google, it'll pop up right away. Before we get into the science, because, Mark Loebleiner made a video, basically said that ProfessorNutz was the worst product ever, and then Joe Binley and everyone had to come out with a response video basically saying, you know what, we realized that we at some point we're going to have to put out the ingredients of the product, the carb and fat blocker. It was just sooner than I guess they wanted to. And I don't know if that could be from a legal aspect, from a patenting aspect. I'm sure that's what it is. Again, I'm not smart enough on the legal side of things to even talk about that. So if you guys want to know why they didn't put out originally, reach out to them. That's not my forte. My forte is the science behind these things. So before we begin, before we go any further, I need to make things very clear about my affiliation with everyone. ProjectAD does sponsor my podcast, which is Beast Fitness Radio. With that, I get a monthly product allotment, and I also get a kickback on the actual discount code used. Now, I want to be very apparent and front up with this. Every penny that I've ever received from ProjectAD, I've put straight into a college fund that I started for my future kids. I started that whenever we started with ProjectAD on the podcast, maybe a year and a half, 2 years ago. It's been a while, and I've always liked ProjectAD as a company because of the people behind it, because of the actual products. Because at the end of the day, you can have the nicest people in the world, but if they don't put out good products, it really doesn't matter. But they just do a good job of doing everything, and I really like the morals and the ethics of the company. So that's the affiliation. Now, I want to be honest with you guys about two big things. First of all, me and Joe don't agree on everything. We've butted heads in the past. He's a good guy. It's just we don't always see eye to eye. So if I see something I don't agree with, I'm going to say it. Or if he says something that I don't agree with, I'm going to say it. Again, I've said that in the past, and guess what? We're adults. We butted heads. We both, basically agreed to disagree, and you move on past it. That's the nice thing about being able to be an adult. It's not like your children where you have to be proven right every time, and if not, then you can't be friends. You have to go off and bash someone or bash their products or anything like that. So there's no reason for me to lie from that aspect because, I've told Joe in the past, hey, I don't agree with this or that, or, you're wrong on this, or you're wrong on that, or this person's wrong on this or that. And so there's that. There's also the fact that the sponsorship from ProjectAD, it's a nice kickback, I'll be honest, with the affiliate program they have, but it's not my main income. That is not even part of my income because I do put it away for my future children for college. So there's no reason for me to put ProjectAD up on a pedestal from a product standpoint, review standpoint, unless if I 100% agree with them. Because 100% of my income, what I use to pay my bills, what I use to pay for my bodybuilding, my food, everything, my house, is through my coaching. So let's use a little common sense here. If this product, ProfessorNutz, was causing people to gain a bunch of weight because it actually had all the calories that real peanut butter contained, my clients are going to look like crap on stage because I have people utilizing it during prep right now. And if they look like crap on stage, guess whose business is going to go down? Mine. Guess whose actual income is going to go down because he looks like a shitty prep coach? Mine. So I wouldn't make them use this product, or I wouldn't, offer them to use this product if I didn't believe in it, if I didn't believe the science behind it. So now that those biases and everyone's point of view is out of the way and out in the open and very clear, let's get into the science behind this. If you're watching this on a video format, you're going to see different studies on the screen, different graphs on the screen. I want to try and make it very play along-ish. So as I'm talking, you can see exactly what I'm talking about. And if you're listening to this on Beast Fitness Radio, I'm going to include a link to every single study that I'm referencing in here because there's a good amount. I do want to say before we begin as well, these are the studies that I'm referencing talking about alpha cyclodextrin. Okay? Now, this is how this specific ingredient was made for these specific studies. ProjectAD has their own variation that I'm sure they're trying to get patented, and again, I don't know enough about that process, but that is specifically for this form. So you can see where there is merit, and you can see where ProjectAD had to get very innovative to actually change the actual shape or structure of the molecule to change it to their actual needs. Remember, if you change one small piece, one little part of a molecule or chemical structure, it can completely alter it. completely. Again, and I've talked about this before, that if you would add something as small as a methyl group on a traditional anabolic, then guess what? You can completely change the characteristics. You can completely change the traits. It will be a completely different drug. New side effects, new beneficial points. There's so many different things that you change one little thing, you alter one little thing, and it can completely change the profile of anything. So ProjectAD has their own variation of this, but I'm here to talk about the research that they're referencing that says, hey, this is a viable option, and now I believe they're actually doing studies on their own version of this. So let's get right into it, guys. There's a lot here. I think the best place to begin would be with how alpha-cyclodextrin works. Obviously, you need to get a drink of water, because I will be talking my ass off in this episode video. Again, alpha-cyclodextrin is a fiber. It actually works selectively at actually absorbing different nutrients because of the actual structure of the molecule. So if you look at typical fiber, it's going to be linked in kind of large, kind of bulky, chemical chains. It looks kind of, stupid whenever you look at it. And they actually bind fat non-selectively. But whenever you compare that to the molecules of alpha-cyclodextrin, you see it's composed of more of a streamlined chemical chain that's linked head to tail and actually forms kind of like a donut-esque shape. So that outer section of the alpha-cyclodextrin donut-like shape actually dissolves very readily in water. So guess what? There's water found in the intestinal tract. The inner walls, the walls of that donut hole, actually repel water. So they selectively cling to fat molecules. Now, the molecular structure of saturated fats is such that these kind of pro-inflammatory fats are strongly attracted to that soluble alpha-cyclodextrin molecule. So once we have these saturated fats are actually bound in that donut hole, the cyclodextrin and fat complexes actually become insoluble in water. So they form almost tiny clump-like materials that are basically excreted from your body before they even enter the bloodstream. Again, there's millions of these small alpha-cyclodextrin donut-like molecules that are moving around and mixing around inside the intestine, and they're readily and rapidly selectively sucking up these unhealthy pro-inflammatory fat molecules. So that's a big standout thing. I'll get to that in a little bit, but they're sucking up things like your trans fat, your saturated fats, and they're carrying them out of the body actually in your poop, so in your stool and your fecal matter. And if you look at traditional fiber, that non-selectively binds fat in about a 1-to-1 ratio. So if you look at about a single gram of alpha-cyclodextrin, it's able to bind up to about 9 grams of fat. Now, this has been researched. Alpha-cyclodextrin has been researched in Japan for well over 30 years, if my math is right on that. It could be wrong. It might be even upwards of 40 by now. But they found, like I previously mentioned, that it drastically reduces glucose spikes as well. So not only is it selectively absorbing these bad fats like trans fats and saturated fats before they reach the bloodstream, it's also reducing blood glucose spikes, and it's actually sparing things like omega-3 fatty acids. So since this fiber can bind up to 9 times its weight in healthy, threatening dietary fats from that intestinal tract, we see these studies, and they have people, and again, these will be the ones that I'll be referencing on the screen. These will be the studies that I will be actually throwing up at the bottom of the podcast. They had people who ate really heavy fat meals a day, and they had 2 grams of alpha-cyclodextrin on top of that. They actually took them before the meals. It actually removed up to about, I think it was 320 some calories from the body before it was actually absorbed. So let's take a second. Let's compare this to the older traditional fat blockers on the market that we know. I'm going to use the big one, Orlistat, because I freaking hate that product, and people are still selling it over the counter. Those rely on actually inhibiting the lipase enzyme that actually breaks down triglycerides, which is, again, the major form of dietary fat, into basically single fatty acid molecules. Now, those drugs actually leave those triglycerides really loose in the colon. Because of that, you can have things like basically fermentation in your colon, so you can produce a lot of gas, a lot of fluids, flatulence. You can have that kind of leaky butt syndrome is the best way to say it. Orlistat in particular is terrible on things like your liver and kidneys because of how it's processed and digested. Obviously, you don't want to have that oil seeping out of your rectum all day. So those things like Orlistat aren't only going to be very uncomfortable to live with, but I think are worse than almost anything you could be taking on the market, to be completely honest. So those are kind of the original fat blockers, and there's other things like Ali, and I believe it was called Xenicol or something like that, and we just don't like those. Those are the, we'll say, the pharmaceutical brands of fat blockers and all these things, whereas alpha-cyclodextrin is from corn. It is just a fiber. So whenever you're looking at ProfessorNutz and it says that it's 100% natural, it truly is. Now, let's kind of look down, and some of these are going to be direct quotes from some of the studies. We have studies that showing, if you look at alpha-cyclodextrin, I believe this is what Joe Billing was referencing whenever he was talking about the health benefits of this product. We have studies on showing basically metabolic benefits, studies on fat blocking. So we're going to go through here and kind of break things down a little bit. And by the way, I probably should have warned you beforehand. I may have to put up a disclaimer before this video. It's going to be a long video, all right, because I want to make sure that it gets its just due. So let's look at the metabolic benefits first of all. So we have researchers, and this is going to be a study, again, that I'll put up on the screen or link down below. They basically designed a controlled human study on the metabolic benefits of alpha-cyclodextrin. They used healthy volunteers. Basically had an overnight fast. Some subjects were given 100 grams, or basically about 3.5 ounces of white bread with water, while others were actually given the same amount of white bread with actual 10 grams of alpha-cyclodextrin in the water. So they looked at glucose and insulin responses following the bread consumption, and they recorded those, and they looked at both of those groups over a 3-hour period. So the control group that was actually not taking alpha-cyclodextrin had a dramatic post-meal rise in both glucose and insulin levels. Then we look at the alpha-cyclodextrin group, and it showed a much reduced rise in post-meal glucose levels, as well as a delayed and much reduced rise in actual post-meal insulin. So you look at that, we find very similar results that was actually done in a double-blind randomized crossover study, which they had 10 healthy volunteers in that one. We look at alpha-cyclodextrin at dosages of 10, 5, 2 grams. And that was actually, in this particular study, was directly mixed with boiled white rice. And at the 5 and 10 gram dose of alpha-cyclodextrin, the amount of glucose that was absorbed by the participants was significantly reduced. And the volunteers experienced actually greater satiety, which is one thing people are experiencing with ProfessorNutz, which is pretty interesting because I'm not quite sure the mechanism on there. But there's another study that found alpha-cyclodextrin, again, reduced that glycemic response to standard carb meals. So if you're looking at adding alpha-cyclodextrin to carbohydrate-rich meals, it may act kind of somewhat as a glucose disposal, maybe not a glucose disposal agent or insulin sensitizing agent, but if it is controlling blood sugar and glucose levels, then there is going to be some positive partitioning going on. It's preventing these glucose spikes, which again is just one of the more overall long-term benefits of alpha-cyclodextrin, because we know in terms of metabolic health issues that are going on today, a lot of it is because people are obese. People are walking around with extremely highly elevated glucose levels and extremely high elevated blood pressure levels, and they are dehydrated. So that's what causes a lot of these metabolic issues that are kind of rampant in the United States today. So now we kind of move on to some of the studies looking at fat blocking. Now, this one study, scientists actually fed mice a traditional standard Western diet, which had fats with the same amount of the addition of actual alpha-cyclodextrin supplementation. So the supplemented group basically showed major reductions, once again, in blood glucose levels of almost all fatty acids. So we look at that, you look at some of the findings in the study, and we see that alpha-cyclodextrin actually removed those fats from the bodies. So it was actually the determination of exactly what fats were decreased, what fats were introduced, or what fats were actually increased. That's what made it so interesting. So this is where it goes back to what we said in the beginning. When you look at that alpha-cyclodextrin group, the trans fats were actually cut by 25%. Saturated fats were actually reduced by 10%. There was a 13% increase in actual omega-3 fatty acids, DHA. And then if you look at the actual LDL and HDL levels, the LDL, I believe, was decreased by 5%, and I believe the HDL remained the same. I could be wrong on that one, but I believe that's how I remember the study being written. So you have a reduction in LDL. You have pretty much the same in HDL. You have a removal of these unhealthy fatty acids. You have an increase in the beneficial healthy fatty acids. So whenever we look at all these studies, Whenever we look at a lot of these, and actually I should have even probably mentioned another study, and this was, again, pretty much the same thing, where researchers actually fed rats a really high-fat diet. Again, some supplemented with alpha-cyclodextrin, some were the control group. They found, once again, that there was actually a 30% reduction in plasma triglyceride levels, 9% reduction in cholesterol, an increase of the amount of fat excretion in actual fecal matter, and it showed overall less weight gain despite the high-fat diets being exactly the same. Again, we look further at these kind of fat reduction, glucose-based studies, and they keep finding improved insulin sensitivity. They keep finding normalization of serum leptin levels. They keep finding, and again, remember, leptin is that satiety hormone that signals the body to basically turn off that feeling of hunger. That in and of itself has some really cool applications, but we won't really get to it just yet. And then, so we have all this information. Now we kind of go into the gold standard here, where they then, after all this information came out, they were kind of like, okay, we have enough science to put together a randomized, placebo-controlled human trial. Let's see what really happens. Now, this study was very well designed, had obese patients with, I believe, type 2 diabetes, and the participants gained an average of 2.2 pounds each over a 30-day period prior to the intervention phase. So then they selected a group of these participants, which were randomly assigned to take 2 grams of alpha-cyclodextrin with each fat-containing meal of the day. The rest were given basically placebos, and all the volunteers were actually asked not to change their regular eating habits or daily routines. So once the supplementation period began, the placebo group actually continued to gain weight, but the alpha-cyclodextrin group didn't experience any further gain in weight. Additionally, if you look here, the actual 2 groups showed major, and I mean major, differences in lipid profiles by the end of the study. We saw that those that didn't use the alpha-cyclodextrin had elevated lipids, whereas the people that did use alpha-cyclodextrin actually had significantly reduced cholesterol levels. I believe it was something like 8.2%, which is a noticeable increase, especially in my eyes. And then if you looked at that, I believe they actually documented and noted there was increased levels of adiponectin, so a hormone that basically regulates glucose levels and actually promotes fatty acid breakdown in the actual alpha-cyclodextrin group, while levels of adiponectin in the other group basically fell around the same. You look a little bit more at some of the cardiovascular benefits that they found in the study, and it was pretty interesting. If you looked, so the study actually looked at a group of the overweight people with a body mass index of, I believe, 25 to 30, something like that, and they were basically randomly assigned, again, placebo or 2 grams of alpha-cyclodextrin with each meal, and that amounts to, I believe, about 6 or so grams of alpha-cyclodextrin per day. So after 2 months of looking at this group, the supplemented individuals actually showed a massive array, once again, of metabolic benefits. So the people that took alpha-cyclodextrin saw an average 5.3 decrease in total cholesterol levels, an average 6.7 decrease in LDL levels, compared to the controls, wherever they saw, it was interesting, they actually saw it here, the supplemented patient levels of APOB, which is an atherosclerosis promoting protein, actually fell by 5.6%, and their serum insulin levels fell by 9.5%. So the people that are taking these alpha-cyclodextrin groups are benefiting greatly and drastically more so than the people that aren't taking the alpha-cyclodextrin. These studies go on and on. There was another study, again, alpha-cyclodextrin was demonstrated to actually absorb many times its weight in fat and to sustain its beneficial effects over a prolonged period of time. So they had 66 obese diabetic patients randomly assigned to either placebo or 2 1-gram tablets of alpha-cyclodextrin in each meal, for 3 months. Again, total about 6 grams per day. It seemed to be a sweet spot with a lot of these studies. And more weight was lost by those with the highest intakes of total in actual saturated fats than those with the lower intakes. So this just further shows that alpha-cyclodextrin is preferentially blocking more of the dangerous fatty acids. It's pretty crazy to be looking at these studies, reading them one after one, and realizing, holy crap, this may not only be able to be helping from a glucose standpoint, to be helping from a fat standpoint, but to be helping from an overall metabolic health standpoint. So there's 3 things that I really like talking about, and that is always the science behind something. which we just covered in forms of the actual studies, which again, you can go and read yourself. Please do, because again, I am far from an expert on anything in this world. If you know more than me, if you consider yourself an expert in alpha cyclodextrin, please reach out to me and I can get you on the podcast, on these videos, something like that. Because we're obviously all trying to learn. Again, ProjectAD obviously has their variation of alpha cyclodextrin that works in a different fashion, but you get what I'm trying to say. So we looked at the science. We know what the literature says. Now we look at two other things. We look at actual application, and then we throw in some common sense. Because to me, you use those three things in the fitness industry, and you can pretty much determine whether someone or something is full of shit or not. So the common, or the practical application, the experience side of things. People have been using ProfessorNutz, and they have not been gaining body weight. I have clients in prep that have just gotten in their product and they're continuing to lose weight. Some of them have kept the actual amount of peanut butter the same. So instead of switching out, we would basically switch out 2 tablespoons of Jif for 2 tablespoons of ProfessorNutz. And guess what? Their weight keeps dropping. Probably more at a more accelerated rate, but I can't really say that, 100% certain. Sorry about that, something popped up on the screen. And then other people, we actually doubled the intake, so they were having a tablespoon of peanut butter. We may have done even 2 or 3 tablespoons of ProfessorNutz, and they're still losing weight in prep. So like I said before, I am a prep coach first and foremost. If this was causing them to gain weight, I would tell them to drop it. I would say, okay, we're gonna do this experiment with someone else because you're 3 weeks out from a show. So we look at the application side of things. People aren't experiencing the weight gain. One interesting thing that I've noticed is with type 1 diabetics. I've had some people reach out to me, and in healthy, normal individuals, I've been seeing that ProfessorNutz has been reducing their glucose levels. This is fasted and fed, and reducing their body weight, because obviously they're switching out calorie for calorie, or they're, like I said, they're replacing them and they're still losing body weight. But type 1 diabetics are seeing a spike in insulin and glucose levels, which I'm really not sure about. That kind of has me stumped. Again, I don't know enough about the variation that ProjectAD used, or Advantage rather used, of alpha cyclodextrin that might be causing this. Now remember, it could also be a person-to-person case. I've had 3 or 4 type 1 diabetics reach out to me who have tried ProfessorNutz and have said this to me. Everyone is responding differently. Whenever you are looking at a population and you're comparing healthy to non-healthy individuals, which would be your normal people versus your type 1 diabetics, there's so many different things going on that I don't have all the information, but it's just something to note. But overall, the actual experience and application of this is it's showing that, guess what? You're not absorbing all the calories because you're still losing weight. You're still getting the satiated effect from the food. You're still getting the product how it should be working. If alpha cyclodextrin does all this in the studies, and then you see it and you apply it in real world application, and it actually shows to do the same thing, okay, we got two out of 3 things. Now the last thing is the common sense side of things. This is where I have to give credit to my fiance Lindsay for, because whenever we first came out with this, whenever I first came out with my breakdown video talking about ProfessorNutz, you had people that were freaking out in the supplement industry, and it's mainly the people that want to sit down and they now want to replace 2 tablespoons of their Jif with a whole jar of ProfessorNutz. Joe Brindley said in the video, that's not what we want you to do, but the fitness industry takes things, everything like that. And I'm quoting my fiance here, but she said, the people that are freaking out are those fat pigs that now just want to sit down and just have an excuse to eat a whole jar. So people that have eating disorders, people that have issues with food that shouldn't be there. Again, I understand that eating disorders are very common in our fitness industry, but this product is not made this product was not made for you to eat more, not exceedingly more. This product should be used to replace, to be used as a caloric deficit, or to be able to, this isn't something that you want to now be using and eating the entire tub for. This is something that you're in prep and you have 2 tablespoons of Jif, and now you drop down to 2 tablespoons of ProfessorNutz, so that, hey, guess what? Now I'm in a caloric deficit. I'm still losing weight, but I'm still eating the same volume of food. You shouldn't be abusing it. That's the common sense side of things that I really wanted to talk about. So we have my affiliation with the company. We have my unbiased review on everything, all of their products, especially ProfessorNutz. We have the science behind ProfessorNutz and alpha cyclodextrin. We have the actual application of ProfessorNutz and alpha cyclodextrin. And now we also have the common sense side of things. So those are 5 big points that bring me to saying this final conclusion of try it yourself. Don't believe me. Don't believe the research. Spend the 12 or 10 or whatever it is dollars and try it for yourself. If you're really gonna be that, I guess, annoyed by this product, because some people got really pissed off about it, then try it for yourself. If you don't want to support the company, that's fine. Don't support the company, don't buy the product, but don't go around bashing it until you've actually tried it. Because I've had people try it. I am seeing this happening every day, and people are still losing weight. There has to be something going on. The literature backs it up. The actual application backs it up. The common sense side of things backs things up. So again, don't take my word for it. Don't take this review's word for it. Don't take the science's, don't take the literature's review for it. Go out, buy yourself, and try it. Again, don't be an idiot about it. You're not supposed to be replacing and having a whole jar of peanut butter per day, no matter who you are. That's just not good practice. That's just not intelligent eating. You should be eating like an adult. But go out, buy it, replace your normal peanut butter, and keep notes. Send them to me. Send them to Joe Binley. Send them to anyone at ProjectAD, and I'm sure that you'll get an amazing response. Or at least, like for me, I'll say, hey, thank you for your input, because I'm collecting all this data. That's one thing I've done with all of my clients, whether it be blood work, whether it be review on different supplements, whether it be reviews on anything out there, different training protocols, different nutritional strategies. We are collecting all this data, and we are conducting our own scientific experiments to see what is working and what's not working. So as always, guys, thank you for watching. This is really the breakdown of ProfessorNutz, the science behind ProfessorNutz. I hope you guys enjoyed it. If you are shopping at ProjectAD or Advantage or anything like that, coupon code BFR25. As always, thank you for watching. Check out theprepcoach.com. I'll see you guys next time. Oh, and if you try out the peanut butter, if you like it, if you don't like it, whatever kind of feedback you have, email me, because I want to know.